Over the last 4 years, I've bought and sold over 10 million in real estate. And in that time, I've lost over $50,000 with contractors. I promise you one thing about this video. Hopefully, I'm going to save you guys some money through mistakes that I've made. Probably isn't going to be the most interesting video, but hopefully adds a little bit of value. If you guys stick around till the end, I do have something that I'm going to give away for free. Just want to increase my retention, so I'm going to make you guys stick around to the end for it. Here's the deal when it comes to buying and selling real estate. A lot of people think that just because they find a good deal that they're going to make money. That's not the case. You can hire the wrong contractor, which is the second reason most people lose money. You can hire a contractor that takes too long, that does shoddy work. And so there's a lot that goes into buying and selling real estate more than just buying the house. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Hopefully save you guys some headaches that I've been through over the last couple of years, because I've been screwed around pretty big by contractors. Started buying and selling real estate at 19. Obviously, I was 19. Didn't have a bunch of people that I was leaning on. I did have some, but they weren't there every time I had these conversations with contractors, and I didn't really have a video to rely on. So hopefully you guys can reference this video before you go hire somebody. The biggest question I get asked, where do you find contractors? So for me, I've got a audience of about 36,000 on Facebook. So I've been lucky to have good people around me that can recommend good contractors. I have contractors that reach out every day that want to work with me. And so that's how I vet my contractors. But if you're starting from ground zero, like I did, and I had nobody on Facebook when I was 19, here's how I would do it. I would start on Facebook groups. It's the #1 way that you can find pretty much anybody. People to mow yards, handymen, general contractors. There's a ton of Facebook groups. I would join the buy, sell, trade Facebook groups. I would join the investor Facebook groups, so off-market homes, your city name, or buy, sell, trade, your city name, and I would join all of those groups. Then I'd go to ChatGPT. I'd have it write up, hey, this is what I'm looking for, contractor, general contractor, yada, yada. We'll get into kind of what you're looking for here in a second. I'd have ChatGPT write that up, and then I'd go ahead and post on all those groups. So that's the #1 way. Secondly, if you know other people or you have relationships, maybe you have a following already, you can make a post on your Facebook or your Instagram, and then you can reach out to people that know you, or maybe they know somebody that knows a contractor. So those are the 2 ways, Facebook groups and referrals really is what it boils down to. Once you have contractors in your pipeline, how do you know that the contractor is going to do good work? How do you know how they run? If you're getting into real estate, it's kind of like this, it's bizarre to people at first. They don't know who to hire. Should they sub everything out? And when I say sub everything out, if you're unfamiliar with that, some people, like when you build a house, you have different subs. You have your electrician, you have your plumber, you have your tile guy, you have your paint guy, et cetera, et cetera. I flip, we'll do 50 houses between just buying and selling them as is and buying and flipping them this year. And I don't like subbing stuff out. I've tried that route before, but for me, my management style, I don't want to have to line out my electrician, my plumber, my tile guy. And then you have to make sure that they all work together. I'm not a new construction guy. I don't run my flips like somebody would run their new construction. Everybody's got a different style, so what works for me may not work for someone else, but that doesn't mean either of us are wrong. And so for me, I like to have 3 or 4 guys that pretty much do everything. And when I say everything, I'm gonna write some stuff out for you guys. I apologize, it's not gonna be the most beautiful, but it really boils down to a few things. You need an electrician, you need a plumber, you need a paint guy, you need someone that does drywall. A lot of times the paint guys do drywall as well. You need somebody that does flooring, and when I say flooring, like LVP, stuff like that, tile guy. And then a lot of guys have a carpenter. That would be like trim, etc. You could have a masonry even. That's a little bit more specialized. That'd be for like brick facade, stuff like that. But these are kind of your big trades, probably missing a few here. This is what it looks like. And so people that sub stuff out, they're going and finding one guy that does each of these. The problem with this, from what I found, is it's really hard to find good people in general. And so to find a good person in each of these trades, it's like finding a diamond in the dozen. I don't want to have to deal with that. There are people that have this method and it works really well for them. If you're gonna do a few flips a year, I don't think that this makes sense. You need to be doing a high volume for this to make sense. What makes sense for me is having 3 guys. I'm gonna draw this out. So you've got 3 guys like this that do pretty much all this. Now, they're not gonna do heavy electrical, they're not gonna do heavy plumbing, stuff like that, but they're gonna be good at drywall, they're gonna be good at flooring, they're gonna be good at tile, at paint, at light electrical. When I say light electrical, I'm talking fixtures, light plumbing, I'm talking hooking up P-traps and stuff, maybe running a little bit of plumbing. That's what I'm looking for. And the reason why is you get a lot more efficiency with 3 or 4 guys that do everything. You don't have to have your paint guy come in, and then if he runs late or if he doesn't finish on time, then that dominoes, and then your flooring guy's late, you gotta push him, and then your carpenter's late, and you gotta push him, because these guys do it all. And so that's what's really nice about this model. I like to have one general contractor that has 3 or 4 guys underneath him that he manages. I manage my contractor, he manages his guys, and then I have an electrician for heavy electrical, and I have a plumber for heavy plumbing. And then we've got a few other guys as well. But that's really like the trifecta that you need. You need one good general contractor with a couple guys, and then you need a good plumber, good electrician. There are other stuff that will come up like roofer, like you'll need a roofer, but there are a million roofers out there. And it is very easy to find roofers versus finding like a general contractor. So you go make your Facebook post, you get 15 inquiries. Now how do you decide who's gonna be the right fit for you? So from there, I would set up, and this is something that I've not done well at in the past. I've gotten lucky with contractors. I've also gotten very unlucky. Let me tell you guys about a contractor who got screwed out of $13,000 in 3 months on a project just 8 months ago. This stuff still happens to me. So, you know, just because I'm sitting here teaching you guys, it doesn't mean that I don't get screwed over either. It literally happens to everybody. It's almost the #1 way that people lose money, once again, other than buying a house wrong. So an investor of mine sends me over or tells me, hey, I've got this contractor. He's getting materials wholesale. He's slamming it right now. He's doing a great job for me. Super cheap. He does high volume, does a ton of jobs for people around the city. I recommend him. And so he told me about this guy 2 or 3 times, and finally I cave. I'm like, okay, send me this guy's contact. That sounds like it's too good to be true, which is my point. If it's too good to be true, it's typically too good to be true. So I call him up, and he, you know, swears up and down. He tells me what I want to hear. You know, he's like, oh yeah, this is what we do. I get my materials, I order them wholesale, yada yada. I get my flooring this cheap, my paint this cheap. And in hindsight, it always looks a lot worse than what it was. When I was having the conversation with him, it sounded great. And so I'm like, okay, let's try you on a project. I just bought a house. Thankfully, I tried him on a project that I knew I had high margin on. So, side note, I still made like 40 grand on the deal, even after losing 13,000 or so from him in a couple months. But anyways, he wanted to be paid up front because he ordered materials, and this is something we'll get into as well. Never pay your guys up front. I knew this, I knew better, but because he came referred by another investor, and the other investor said he was doing really good work, I thought, no big deal, pay him up front. I had him meet me in my office. We signed a contractor agreement, which we'll get into as well. We signed the contractor agreement. He gives me his ID. He gives me, he fills out a W-9 for me for taxes. Everything seems super legit. And then I give him my money, and then crickets for weeks. And so I'm checking in, and he's like, oh, we're waiting on materials. Checking in, waiting on materials. Long story short, he was playing the game of robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is where contractors go around, they overpromise, they get money, and then they take that money, they pocket some, and they go finish their jobs prior. And then they keep doing this. It's a Ponzi. It never works out. It doesn't work out. A couple weeks later, or maybe like a month and a half later, it all fell down. I have recordings of him saying, yeah, I lied to you. I didn't order the materials. I never had your materials. And so that was a lesson learned the hard way that I had learned prior to that, and I just didn't listen to myself. So I had to learn that lesson a couple times. So learn it from me. If it sounds too good to be true, it typically is. And if they want to be paid up front, never pay them up front. I don't care if they're a good contractor, they can float the first couple of days out of their own business account. If they ever say, oh, well, we got to pay our guys. Well, if you run a tight business and you run a true business, then you can float that out of pocket until I see that the work's done, and then I'll pay out from there. And if they're not willing to do that, then they're not the right contractor. So anyways, just a quick story. I've got some other ones that I'm going to tell you guys about here in a second. But you need to vet them out. You need reviews. You need photos of past work. You need to ask them how much that work cost. If they show you a shower, say, how much did that shower cost for you if you were to do that for me? If they show you flooring they've done, ask them how much they typically charge for flooring. So you can get a general idea on cost. You're trying to learn here as well. And so that's a big one. Have that initial conversation with them, and then ask them how many people they're currently working with, because you don't want a contractor that's working with 17 different investors and they're only on your project 1 day out of the week. That's not efficient. They're not going to get the job done. And so it's important to ask that up front, because some of these guys will draw themselves too thin and then your projects don't get done. And then most importantly, what type of model do they run? Do they have the sub model where they're subbing everything out like this? Or do they have this model where they have one crew that they're going to put on your project 7 days a week? This is really important. I much prefer this right here, and this is what I run for the most part now. This runs a lot quicker and it's a lot more efficient as well. And so I'd be asking that. And then I ask them how they get paid. Do they have a cost plus model? Are they going to give you the price that their subs charge and they charge 15% on top? Or do they have a flat fee like some of my contractors? They charge me $85 an hour, and whatever gets done in an hour, that's all that it costs me. And so these are different questions you need to be asking. I would also ask for references. Call those references, ask how the jobs went. Did they do the work on time? Was it good workmanship? Those are the two things you're going to run into. Was the work done on time, and was it done well? And how much did it cost? So like an old saying here in the real estate business, and I think it's pretty true, but there's like a trifecta of, I'll write it out, price, and then time, and then workmanship. I think this is how it goes. So they say you only get 2 out of 3. So you got to pick the 2 that you want. Do you want price and workmanship, or do you want time and price? Like done quickly and then cheap, then you're not going to get workmanship. If you want it done quickly with good workmanship, then it's going to cost you more money. If you want, and then just so on and so forth. If you want good price and good workmanship, then it's going to cost you time. And so they say you got to pick 2 out of 3. I don't know. I feel like the crew that I run now, they do stuff quickly. They do stuff for good workmanship, but they aren't cheap. They're $85 an hour. That's worth for me to pay rather than, my Logan here is smiling because I think we're like 15 minutes in. And workmanship. Okay. Craftsmanship. He says it's supposed to say work or craftsmanship. I don't know. This was supposed to be a 15-minute video. It's probably going to be a 30-minute video. It is what it is. I want to get through this. I want to show you guys some good value here and hopefully save some other people some money. If you guys can, it really means a lot. Drop me a like, drop me a subscribe, and please drop a comment. It's good for the algorithm. I'm not charging any money for this. I'm just looking to grow and hopefully save some other people in the process of some lessons that have cost me a lot of money. So you have that conversation with them. Let's say it goes well. You narrow down to a couple guys. I would recommend you go ahead and meet them at that point. Maybe find a property. Hopefully at this point you have properties that you're looking at. Find a property that you can meet them at to kind of go through the project with you. And things that I would be looking for is, are they pointing out issues that they see? If you just say, okay, if you're just going around and you're saying, do this, do this, do this, and they're like, all right, all right, all right, and they're not adding any value and they're not saying, hey, well, did you think about this? Or if we do this like this, what about this over here? They're not adding any value. That's a huge red flag to me. I would be very careful about hiring somebody that when you're walking through a project, especially as a newer investor, whether you're new or amateur or advanced, they should be able to add value. Even Tony, my guy, I bought and sold 10 million in real estate. I go out with Tony. He's still going to point stuff out. We all miss stuff. I'll say, hey, we got to replace all this. He's like, well, what are we doing about the dishwasher? That's adding value. That's what you want from a general contractor. That's where they make their money. Now, I get asked a lot, is it worth being your own contractor? Personally, I don't think so. I make my money from buying and selling real estate. I am not in the business to manage my contractors or manage the people that are beneath my general contractors. I have a general contractor so they can take on that risk and they do the management. And I make my money buying and selling real estate. And so I like to stay in that lane. And, you know, I see a lot of people get this shiny object syndrome when they start flipping houses and they're like, okay, I'm going to have a property management company and I'm going to have my own contracting company. And they want to vertically integrate. So they want to do everything, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but you can't do that in 2 years. This stuff takes a lot of focus. If you want to flip houses, it takes a lot of focus. If you want to be a general contractor, that takes a lot of focus. My contractors don't really buy real estate, and that's because their business is contracting. I buy a lot of real estate. I don't contract for other people. Hopefully that makes sense. So you narrow it down, you pick your person. Let's say that you're comfortable, you've seen their work, you've hopefully seen reviews, you've talked to other people that they've done work for. Time to start your project. So when you go to start a project, before you do anything, and this is where I like making these videos because I've gotten a little lax with this lately, but you need to get a contractor agreement signed. Let me explain the importance of a contractor agreement. 2.5 years ago, I had somebody replace a roof for me. The dude was shady. I kind of knew he was shady. I knew he was shady because he never did stuff on time and he just had kind of an odd vibe. That should have been red flag number 1. Red flag number 2 is my wife didn't like him. That's typically if my wife doesn't like you, she's got a pretty good gauge of character. And every time I've still worked with somebody, I've gotten screwed by them. That should have been my second gauge, but he did cheap roofs. So I had him do a few and I had him do this roof, which was a triplex for me. And it was an $8,000 roof. And everybody else bid me like 10. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with Sam. He's 8,000. So I get the roof done with Sam. I then get a letter in the mail, like 3 months later, from a guy named Manuel. He placed a lien on my property because he said Sam never paid him. So Manuel was the subcontractor to Sam. And I guess Manuel did the roof, and Sam never paid him what he was owed. And a lot of people don't realize this, and I also think it depends on what state you're in. But here in Oklahoma, and I think this is with a lot of states, so I would verify with your state, if you hire somebody and they subcontract out to the work and they don't pay their subcontractor, guess who's on the hook? You are, as the homeowner. So I was on the hook to pay Manuel $6,000 on top of my $8,000 because he never got paid, which I think is a bunch of horse shit, but it is what it is. That's how the system works. So we got to work around the system. So I have a lien waiver now in my contractor agreement with all that to be said. Now, a little side note there. I was able to negotiate Manuel down. We went to arbitration, and then I ended up paying him like $3,000. But I still had to pay him the $3,000. And I think it came down to like, look, dude, I got screwed. You got screwed. Let's work something out, you know, instead of like continuing to fight this. I was going to have to pay it at the end of the day, but I was able to negotiate that lien down. So anyways, all that to say, you need to meet and have a contract agreement signed. This is what I'm going to give away to you guys. Wait till the end. I'll tell you guys how you get it. But the contractor agreement is this. You're not going to be able to read this, and I can barely read it. So objectives of the contract. You need to have, what's the objective? Like, what are we doing here? What's everything that is going to be done? This could also be scope of work is what that could be called. Payment terms. When are you going to pay out? How are you going to pay out? With our contractors now, because we pay so many checks every week, we make everybody invoice us by Thursday at the latest, and then we pay out on Friday. And Logan is the one that cuts all the checks. Today's Thursday, we've been getting the invoices. Tomorrow we'll pay everybody. That helps us because we're not running around chasing contractors all the time, all week long. They're not asking us for payment. They know they're going to do the work. They're going to get paid on Friday. Is this going to be materials and labor? So is the contractor paying for the materials and the labor? Personally, I would not recommend allowing your contractor to control your materials. A, they can mark the materials up. B, they can get the wrong materials. I like to have more control. It is a little bit more work. I do have Logan as my project manager that manages the material piece, but before him, I was managing that. And I just think it's important to keep control of the materials. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't have an account at Lowe's and they can go and pick up materials and you can do a phone sale, but I'm not going to leave it up to my contractor to invoice me for materials at the end of the week. No way. I'm paying for materials. We're going to bid labor only. When I'm getting a price, I want it to be labor only. Unless you're doing something like a roof, that would be different. Okay, so from there, permits and approvals. Who's handling permits? If you're pulling permits, we'll leave that up to you guys. To be frank, it depends on the project for me. If I'm doing paint, flooring, and a light fixture, I'm not going to pull permits for that, and so that's something that you need to line out here, though, because there are some municipalities that you have to pull permits, and you want to know what your worst case scenario is if you get popped for not pulling permits. What happens at that point? Is your contractor going to be able to pull them at that point? Insurance and liability. So once again, I've got a little lax, but ideally you want to get insurance and liability from your contractor or any bonds that they have to show that they're insured and that if something happens on your job site, you're not getting sued, because that would fall back on you as the homeowner. Workmanship guarantee. This just says that they're going to guarantee the workmanship, that it's going to be done in a professional manner. And so if you get to the end of the project and you got some shoddy miter on some trim, that you can hold them to that and say, look, dude, we have a workmanship guarantee in our agreement. And worst case scenario, you could take them to court. Termination clause. So what happens if you guys get mid-project and you decide, I'm done with this guy? It's what you have a termination clause for. And so I've got that in mind. And then you have a dispute resolution. This is with most contracts you want to have, if A happens, then what? So dispute resolution typically says you're going to go to arbitration before litigation. You're going to go and try to work this out in mediation before you go into each other. And then important for me in my business is I want a W-9 signed. So a contractor you work with in January, you may not work with in April or even September. And so if you don't talk to that contractor for a year, next year rolls around. Most people aren't thinking about taxes, but it's super important. And your CPA says, hey, we need to get a W-9 from this contractor. And you're sitting there like, I've been in this position, like, oh crap, I haven't talked to this guy in 8 months. I actually didn't leave on good terms with him. Now you got to go reach out to him and be like, hey dude, I need your social security for my taxes. That doesn't roll over well. Get this signed up front and you won't have that issue. So we get a W-9 signed up front, so that way we don't have to chase these guys down at the end of the year. And then one of the most important ones is that lien waiver. You want to make sure that you got that waiver that says that they've paid all their subs and that we have no liability for once we pay them for any of the work that's been done. And then you want to collect an ID. Let me do a quick disclaimer. I'm not a CPA. I'm not a lawyer. This is what I have provided from me. So I am going to send this out to you guys for anybody that wants it, but use it for educational purposes and have it checked by your own lawyer and your own CPA and make sure that it works in your state or where you live. I have people from all over the world, so this stuff isn't going to work everywhere. But hopefully it gives you guys some good gauges on what you're going to need, what you're looking for when you're hiring a contractor. Okay, from there, once again, we touched on payment structure. I never pay up front. A good contractor is going to be able to float the first week at least by themselves. If I pay up front, it is literally the tiniest bit, $500 or a couple $100. I'm only going to pay what I'm okay losing. I've paid, once again, Manuel up front, $12,000 or $13,000. I was out all of that. Now, I did have a contractor agreement signed, and I could have sued him. Not something worth getting into today, but I didn't sue him because I think I make more money doing stuff like this and going and buying more deals, so I didn't want to deal with it. Anyways, what are we missing here? Red flags to look for. Are they antsy to start the project? That's a red flag to me. If they're like, hey, we want to get on this, we want to get on this, that means that they probably don't have much work, which also could mean that they don't do great work, because contractors are hard to come by. So if you do good work, you're going to be able to stay busy. So I would be a little bit nervous about using somebody that's antsy to start your project. Not that I wouldn't use them, I would just be weary and be careful. From there, overselling without verification. So telling you, hey, I've been licensed for this many years, I've been doing this my whole life. Everybody wants to say that they're a contractor and that they've been working on homes their whole life until they go and do the work and you're like, dude, what is this? I've never seen something so horrible. So you want to make sure that they can provide photos and verification that the work's been done. If not, you may not want to use them. Ask for money up front. Once again, I'm not paying guys up front unless it's like a one-off deal or I'm not paying much. And then no scope of work. You got to have a scope of work, because you're going to get a month and a half in, and you're going to be like, hey, I thought we included this. And they're going to say, no, we didn't have that included. That's going to be X amount more. If you don't have anything in writing, everything falls back to having it in writing. If you don't have it in writing, then it just doesn't mean anything. A handshake deal just isn't a handshake deal anymore. We can't trust people in this day and age. And side note, that is something, you know, when I got into real estate, I feel like I had a lot more trust in people. I have a lot less trust in people nowadays. Not that I try to see the good in everyone, but I am definitely weary after losing, like I said, close to $50,000 from contractors, from people that I thought wouldn't screw me over, and they did screw me over. And that's just the name of the game. I could sit here and say this is their fault, but ultimately it's my fault, because if I don't take ownership, then I can't do anything about the situation. So this here is me taking ownership of saying, you know what? I'm gonna take ownership, I'm gonna eat it, but it's not gonna happen to me again. And that's why I have all of this. Are they flaky? You know, you don't wanna work with somebody that's flaky. I mean, that is what it is. They might do good work, but if they're flaky, I'd be very careful. Excuses. I hear this literally, oh, my truck broke down, my transmission's out, my this, my that. I don't like excuses. I'm not a big guy for excuses. There's a saying that I've been going with here lately, and it might be selfish, I don't know, but your problems are not my problems. And so I have my people, I have my family that I have to take care of. And I've had an issue in the past of like taking the shirt off my back to help other people out and then getting screwed over. And once again, just taking ownership, I've made their problems my problems, and I don't do that anymore. So their excuses are not my excuses. And I'm sorry to hear it, but if we have an agreement and you said you're gonna do the work and your transmission went out, you need to figure out what you're gonna do to finish the work out. So, and no insurance. Once again, I would verify they have insurance. I'd verify the general contractor license if your state has some sort of licensing and any sort of background. Now here's a little side note. This is like a gem that could have saved me a ton of money if I would have done this one little thing, and it is checking your state court network. So here in Oklahoma, everything's public. It's on oscn.net. I'm sure your state has their own version of that. Go and pull that person up in your state and see what type of litigation they've been in. Have they been in trouble? Because a lot of times the people I've been screwed by have also screwed over like 15 other investors. So if I would have looked at that first and just verified, probably wouldn't have had to deal with a lot of these guys. Okay, that's all I've got for now. You know, there's a lot more that we could go through. There's a lot involved with contractor management, and I'm working on other videos. We'll put other videos out there. I'm not really a big guy for like scripting my videos, so I wrote out some stuff that I wanted in here, but otherwise I like hitting stuff from the dome. I can tell you dozens of stories of me getting screwed by contractors, me working with guys that I'm trying to give a leg up and them taking 5 or 6 weeks longer than an actual contractor would take. And so that is something I'll point out real quick. Would never go with the cheapest bid. Typically, they're the cheapest for a reason. Now, sometimes I still go with the cheapest bid, but I have the experience. I've been screwed to kind of know what to look out for. So in the beginning, I'd say it's worth it to pay a little bit more to make sure that you're getting a quality product. Because the last thing you want to do is go spend $30,000 and you get to the end and you realize the whole rehab is horrible. You can't sell the property. And that's how you can buy a property for a good price and still lose money. And I've had it happen to investors. So make sure that you know what you're looking for. Make sure that if you're buying out of state that you know exactly what's being done and that there's good craftsmanship or workmanship or whatever that is. And so hope that adds value. If you want my contractor agreement, once again, this is for educational purposes only. Use it for educational purposes only, but I will send you my contractor agreement. I'm trying to grow my Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. I'll put it right here real quick. And shoot me a DM. I'm not gonna ask for your email. I'm gonna put it in a Google Drive and I will send it straight over for you to download. C.burkeee. I'd probably need to change that. That's my Instagram there. Hit me with a follow, shoot me a DM, put what you liked about this video or what you learned, and then for that contractor agreement. If you guys want to see anything else like this, let me know. These are kind of boring videos. I understand it's just me sitting here talking, but I appreciate, you know, if I can save somebody else from losing $5,000 or $10,000, even if I only had 50 views, it would be worth it for me. So thanks for plugging in. Catch you guys later.